The biggest lie that parents believe is that firm discipline equals harm. Hi, everybody. We are Mike and Brenda Baker, and today we are talking about discipline versus damage, the real truth about parenting.
So, I always notice because you guys probably see my eyes veer off a little bit. It's because I'm watching the monitor, quite honestly, to make sure that everything is operating right. And I'm sure that for a long time you guys probably think, man, Mike is short. No,
No,
I'm
he's
6 foot. She's 5'9", right?
uh-huh.
5'9". I don't know why it shows this way, but that is your pattern interrupt for the day. Mike is not shorter. Anyway, so, you know,
I sit up straighter though. Straight.
and I just sit comfortably instead of like a board is tied to my back. So, all right, you know, I have spent a little bit of time via TikTok working in the estranged parent space, primarily because there are a lot of hurting families out there, a lot of hurting families, and a lot of them are blended families because there's so much more baggage to unpack in a blended family than there is in a traditional family. And it doesn't mean traditional families are immune. Okay, so when we're talking about discipline versus damage, that is the question of the day. Because I'm afraid that when you look at this, you know, we need to talk about real truth, right? These estranged kids are stating that there's trauma and that there's damage, right? And these parents are like, hey, you know, I just disciplined you. You know, there's parental struggles for crying out loud. Do you do everything right? You know, I mean, my oldest son is 35. My youngest son is what, 25?
Going to be 25.
Going to be 25 in December. And every day is the first day I've parented at this stage, even now.
Yeah.
Right? Every day you learn something, every day you get something else. And so, you know, us covering this doesn't just cover parental estrangement. I mean, it covers, you know, the whole deal behind discipline versus damage. But I mentioned parental estrangement because it gives you a foreshadow of what you have to look forward to if you're not careful. And I don't mean that you have to kiss the rear end of all these children. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. What we are here to tell you is that not all discipline is damage. Not all discipline is damage. I mean, I don't even know why it's got to be a discipline versus damage thing. Discipline is a gift. Okay? When you get a college degree, it takes discipline. When you learn a trade, it takes discipline. When you invent something, play an instrument, it takes discipline. When you learn something, it takes discipline. But yet the second you employ discipline to one of your kids, you're evil. And it's trauma. And that's bull. It's just not true. All right. So, why don't you tell them about the poll?
So we polled you guys, and we found that 67% of you said that your number one struggle was agreeing on parenting. And we would tell you that you're not the only one, okay? We have had our struggles in parenting. Obviously, now that all of our children are, you know, moved out and on their own and adults, it's very different. But there's still times today, not today as in today, but there have been times, you know, in the last few months even, that we've disagreed on something that the other said to one of the kids or their spouse or their kids. So understand that you are not the only person that feels like when problems come up, it's usually because of discipline or because of something that happened with one of the kids in the household, and you're feeling like your spouse isn't doing anything about it. It is very, very common when there are kids in the house that are not biologically related to a parent, to have some struggles when it comes to that. Now, I want to speak to you moms first. I'm just going to be bold and blunt with you. A lot of you have been single moms either always until you got married, or you had a really bad relationship in your first marriage or two, and now you've come to this marriage with all of the problems that have created your tough shell. And so you're mama bear, and you're protecting your kitties. And I want to tell you that that is the single biggest thing that you are doing to separate your marriage right now. We see it all the time. We've seen lots of single moms come into marriage and then they just can't handle a man being in the house because they're not used to it. It's uncomfortable. And I want to be frank with you. I was a single mom. I was a single mom for 2.5 years before we got married. And it was hard for me because I had a strong father figure, but this guy is a strong father figure and in a different way than my dad, okay? It was a struggle for me, but I learned to trust him because I chose to.
Well, and I'd like to think that I conducted myself in a manner that was
yes.
conducive to trust.
But the first thing that you have to do is you have to choose to trust. Then you can start seeing the things that your husband is doing that is going to help the kids in the long term. You can't be short-sighted on this parenting gig.
So there's a lie attached to this statistic the statistic we got from you guys where we said 67% of you said number one struggle is agreeing on parenting decisions. The lie that's attached to that is we were too harsh in our parenting, or we're being too harsh in our parenting. Discipline, we talked about it a second ago. Discipline is a gift, okay? And I mean, it gives your kids so many things. It teaches them boundaries. It teaches them respect. It teaches them how to work hard. It teaches them how to treat others well. It teaches them how to treat themselves well. Okay, so this whole idea that we're too harsh in our parenting, here is where this dynamic plays out, is one parent has their bio kids, and the step parent says, hey, hun, I think you're being too easy on the kid. Now, talking about the single mom thing, here you're married, but single mom kicks in. These are my kids. I will do with them what I want.
Yeah.
Okay, let me remind you, this is a Christian-based channel.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be perfectly blunt here. If you put your kids before your marriage, even in a blended family, don't call yourself Christian.
No.
Because that is not Scripture. Scripture says husband, wife, children. Well, let me get real technical. God, husband, wife, children. Now, do I say that to be mean or do I say that to be cutting? No, it's a fact. But you can't let how you feel override what you know. When the damage happens is because you think your spouse, the step spouse, is going to be too hard. You anticipate harshness, and they may not be. All they're suggesting most of the time, to be perfectly honest, is boundaries and discipline and consequences.
And remember, the Bible talks a lot about humility and how we're to be humble and be willing to but to be willing to compromise with our spouse. That's one of the key ways that Mike and I have been able to deal with a whole lot of stuff that a lot of people, divorce over. We made the choice, but then we put the steps in place that we were able to hold ourselves accountable, but also come to the table with, what would you say?
With what?
Like, we were able to come to the table and disagree, but still be trying to work toward a solution.
We had rules in place.
Yeah,
okay?
That's what I said.
Well, no, I mean, so that when we came to the table, those rules always applied. If we couldn't agree on something, one of two things would happen. If it was something that was a non-point that we couldn't agree on, we just scrapped it.
It
right,
didn't matter.
and went a different direction. However, if it was something that was important and we couldn't agree on, to be perfectly honest, the choice was mine to make as the head of the house. I don't say that to belittle women, and I don't say that to empower men. That is simply the scriptural model we chose.
And that was the model that we chose, and it was the decision that we made.
together.
I wanted, because I know myself. And when we were very young and I started reading the scripture, because remember, I was not a Christian before I met Mike. I learned about Christianity. He challenged what I thought, but I was not somebody who was interested in God. And actually, if you've watched any of our videos, I've said before, it wasn't really that I had a problem with God or didn't believe in him. It was that I had been in a church that was very be churchy at church and then be something else everywhere else. So
That's a different video for a different time.
right. But I knew that if I didn't figure out ways to force myself to submit, I am not the submitting type of woman. I am more of a self, I can do this. I would be a boss babe if I were not a Christian, to be honest with you. I would be the one that would, I don't need no man, because in a lot of things I don't. However, the scripture hit my heart really quickly, and I started realizing if I didn't have certain things in motion, I may go rogue. And I didn't want to do that because, first of all, Mike was super, super important to me. And how he thought and what he felt was super important to me and still is. I don't mean was, but I'm just talking about in our beginnings. So I had to figure out ways that he could help me if we were struggling with something. And so that was honestly my rule, wasn't it? That if we couldn't agree, you made the decision.
Well, that was our rule. We agreed on it.
We agreed on it, but I think
but
I brought it.
You were the one that. So here, let me say something to that.
Yeah.
If you, okay, I know we're talking about discipline versus damage, and we're talking about, is your parenting harsh, and the lie being we were too harsh, or he's going to be too harsh, or she's going to be too harsh. See, this is all set up for failure. All right, the whole idea, if you think for 2 seconds Satan's a dummy, he's not. All right, he's got your number. He's going to push you in an area that you think, these are my kids. I mean, you would be shocked at the amount of polls I look at where people get asked who comes first, the husband or the spouse or the children. And it's a phenomenal number of people who say it's the children that come first. So, and that's just not true. But the point...
It's not godly either.
It's not godly. But here's my point. This all comes down to the relationship. Okay?
Yep.
I can honestly say, as an example, Brenda told me straight up when we first got married, I do not want to be a stay-at-home mom.
I did.
Now, Brenda and I were very close, even in the beginning.
Yeah.
I intuitively knew. I said, okay. You remember me saying
Yeah,
that? I said,
yeah.
okay. So I'm not going to make you do anything you don't want to do. I knew what I prefer. She knew that I preferred that, but she also knew I wasn't going to put my foot down about it because we're a team.
And you never pressured me.
I never pressured you.
Not once.
However, I'm going to tell you right now that intuitively, because the gut is an absolute blessing of a tool that the Lord has given us.
Yeah.
In my gut, I knew one day she'd want to. So I wasn't worried about it. I wasn't concerned about it. Sure enough, one day I got a phone call, and she was like, I can't. I'll be honest. It was after a couple miscarriages. She went back to work, lost a patient because she was a nursing assistant at the time, lost a patient that was very close to her, and that was kind of the last straw. And she called me and said, I don't know if I can do this. I think I need to be home with the boys. And with no plan,
And a whole lot of child support.
but yeah, with no plan, a ton of child support, and absolute conviction, I told her to go give her notice right then. Mm-hmm. I said, go give your notice. And she did. And you've heard me say it a few times. I've worked 2, 3, 4 jobs sometimes to make sure that she could stay home. And I don't regret any of that time. So, but I kind of got off track a little bit. Let me back up. You have to be talking so much that you know what your spouse is probably going to do at some point, even if they say one thing.
Yeah.
If you got married and you were not willing to let that other person parent your kids, I mean, stop and think about it. In sickness and in health, for rich or for poor, till death do us part. right? No matter what, which means your kids. Now, you may have certain decisions and everything based on an ex that you've got to deal with, but you deal with that together. You don't deal with that by yourself. You cannot come into a union partly. You can't zip up a coat if there's not a zipper on both sides of that, on both sides of the coat. All right? Can't zip it up. Nor can you run an adequate marriage and have bond unless you're willing to let that other person parent your kids. That is the ultimate test. If you cannot let that other person parent your kids, set boundaries, learn discipline, or teach discipline within their own house also, you drop the ball.
Yep.
Go ahead. Sorry, my rant is over.
You know, and if your spouse, you know, ever feels, let me say it this way: if your spouse and you don't always agree, you know, the thing to remember is that your kids don't need perfect parents. They need united parents. Mm-hmm. Now, when we say parents, we don't mean you and your ex. We mean the two of you in the household. If you're new to this channel, you know, the real damage comes when parents just disagree and they do it openly in front of the kids. That is one of the most damaging things, because remember, your kids were there for your last marriage. Yep. And they're no dummies. God put within them a sense about them. They know when you fought with your ex. They knew. Even if they never said anything to you, they knew. I used to, when my parents would fight, I would automatically go into cleaning mode because I was so stressed out that, and my parents didn't throw things. They didn't, you know, scream at they yelled sometimes, but not very often. But any disagreement, or if my dad was giving the silent treatment, like, I would be in cleaning mode until that was over. It would stress me out so bad. So don't think that your kids don't notice now just because the step parent isn't their actual parent. It's compounding now because they already know what happens when you're unhappy.
Remember, blended family is still family.
Yeah.
You may have extra baggage, but you need to run that household as close to an actual family as possible.
Yeah.
That's why, I mean, if your kids learned respect and boundaries and all that, then you did it right. Let me, you know, don't let what you see going on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook with this estrangement stuff, and then, you know, I mean, don't let that be your level of measurement as to what you're doing. Well, if I do this with my kids, they're going to have trauma. I want you to cut that stupid word out of your vocabulary. Okay? You're teaching them life skills. Yeah. And let me tell you, I've told you before, I'm a master plumber. I've had many apprentices, and apprentices these days, they're good kids, but they lack skills they should have learned at home.
Yeah.
I think it would be wonderful if somebody could give a resume class, for instance. Most of the resumes I get, this long. No joke. 3 sentences, 4 sentences, maybe a job listing on there if I read through it. Okay, and so what that tells me is that they are lacking basic life skills. So, you know, I try to give as much leverage in that area as possible. Why do I bring all that up? Because you can't, and Brenda said this, and I always appreciated when she said it, that you can't take credit for your kids' successes, nor can you take credit for their failures. You did your job. If they are failing, it's their time to learn. It's not your failure as a parent. Now, if you did not give them life skills, that's contributing to their problem, yes. But once they leave the house and they're adults and they choose to continue in that mode, then it becomes, you know, it becomes their problem as well. But what we're saying is, don't beat yourself up. Don't think that being harsh is not love and it's going to cause trauma that's just not true. Don't be afraid to be a parent. You're not their buddy. Your mom or your dad. One day you'll have the opportunity to be friends. But let me say this: you are never going to be equal with your kids, no matter how much you want to be.
Yeah.
My kids are never going to be. I'm 55 years old right now. My kids are never going to be my age at the same time I am. I am always going to have 20 plus years more life experience than them. That's not being rude. That's math. It's math. And that's okay. And we don't have to be equal to have a great relationship, even as adults.
Right. You know, when parents are divided, what they're actually doing to their kids is they're making them anxious and manipulative or rebellious. One of the three or all. And so that's what we want to avoid and help you avoid. You know, parenting decisions are made so much easier when we just open our ears and listen. Listen to what our spouse is actually trying to tell us, not what we think they're trying to say. You know, I think that a lot of us married people assume before we hear, because we're already all hyped up on whatever the topic is. And I think that if we would stop and listen longer and more intently, I think that could really change a lot of how we, the fights that happen. It could take a lot of those away, because silly misunderstandings are probably the biggest problem when it comes to parenting struggles. And so I just encourage you to, you know, listen before you speak, but also listen to hear, not to respond. It doesn't matter what your spouse is saying. They need to get it out. And sometimes, especially as a woman, sometimes we just have to get out everything we're thinking and then be like, okay, so that wasn't you, this, you know, and that sort of thing. And so it's really important to just listen. And when Mike says harsh parenting, we're going to say that's in air quotes. The reason being is we don't in any way agree with child abuse or anything like that. What we mean by harsh parenting is firm parenting.
What was normal 30 years ago?
Yeah. Not being mean, not, you know, despising your stepkids, nothing like that. Normal parenting that a lot of you millennials aren't doing. Okay, now I hate to call you out, but a lot of the times with kids that we've dealt with recently, especially, they have millennial parents and they've done this gentle parenting thing. And gentle parenting is actually harming your kids. It's not helping them. And I know that you think that in the future they're going to be much more in tune with their emotions and this and that. I understand all of your thinking, but let me tell you from experience, that's not how this works. The more firm boundaries and the better on teaching the kids what to do rather than doing it for them is going to help them a whole lot more in the real world. Because, you know, I think that it's very difficult for a lot of, you know, especially millennials, but also Zs, to show up to work on time. Well, that's a failing, you know, and so I'm getting in the weeds, but.
So, to be clear, we're Gen X, and we're not saying Gen X had it figured out.
No.
Okay, a lot of Gen X, I'm not talking about us specifically, but a lot of Gen X did wrong by the millennials. I'll sit here and I'll be the first to say it, you know. We have 3 millennial kids and 2 Gen Z kids, quite honestly. And the biggest thing we taught them was how to work hard and how to progress, and we taught them boundaries. But not everybody did that, and I get that. So we're not just picking on millennials, but that is where a lot of that's, you know, coming from. I was saying it the other day that as far as I'm concerned, millennials were the first true keyboard generation. Okay, now keyboards were introduced when Gen X were kids. I mean, we were the ones.
Well, we were teenagers.
We made the transition from no phone to cell phones to computers to, you know, I mean, that was us. Millennials, they were born into that, and so I often joke that Gen X was the last generation to actually insult you to your face. Now everybody does it on a keyboard. So, but you know, bringing it down here, that's why we created the Blended Family Momentum Accelerator, was so that if you've got questions, you can get on, you can take the course, You can get some of the answers, and it's going to help you ask better questions. Really, that's a big thing right there. Ask better questions. When everything comes down to it, you got to take it to God.
Yeah.
All right, and that's what we've tried to do with the accelerator, is show you how to do that with each other, and in doing so, bringing it back to God.
Right. And really, unity in your decisions, in the parenting, in your marriage, honestly, it helps your marriage, but it also helps your kids' hearts. The best thing in the world is to have your step kid or kids appreciate you for something. Okay, that's what every step parent really wants, right? That's what I always wanted, was them to say, I really appreciate that. I thought that was going to happen in the adult years more. That's not been our story, but we had a lot of excess things that happened. And so that can be kind of difficult and whatever. But
so the last thing I want to put out there is you need to quit measuring your parenting by how your kids react and how your kids act.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of back and forth going on between you and the ex, there's so many factors for a blended family that affect the kids and not positively.
Mm-hmm.
The goal here is for you at the end of the day and your spouse to be able to look in the mirror and look yourself in the eye or your spouse in the eye and said, today we did the best we could. Today we did it right. Today we did it together. Because when your kids become adults, if they're not already, and something happens, first thing you want to do, if it wasn't positive, is blame yourself.
Yeah.
You need to start looking at each other and in the mirror now and looking to God and saying, today I did my best. I might have made some mistakes, but today I gave my heart 100% to this thing, and I did everything I could to show that kid I love him, and I will do the same tomorrow regardless.
Right. Yeah, and I think as a step parent too, it's easy to get in the mindset, well, I'll do it when he does or she does. That's not going to happen, most likely. So don't even make that be something that you're looking for. Do it because it's right, because God says so. So,
That's all I got.
anything else? Okay. All right. Well, just remember that strong parenting builds that trust. And even if it feels tough in the moment, it is right for you, your children, and your family. So with that, we're going to close off today. We thank you so very much for being here with us today. If you have comments, please leave them below. If you have questions, you can always email us at help@blendedfamilymomentum.com. I do check it, so if you need to do that, you can. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.